Hey everybody, Gatorade here, and my goodness, I am just glad to be back to full health once again. I mean, in the last video, that one witch lady with the green suit, came into my house and unfortunately she electrocuted me. But luckily though, I was able, to get to Maple Valley Hospital and now I'm all fixed up and ready to go. And August, just came around the corner and all that stuff. And my goodness, I have just had a very, very crazy summer, with a lot of crazy events and all that stuff. And I know in the last video that I was in, I was basically talking about like how I was in Redmond and how there was a food fight in Redmond and all that jazz. But this adventure that I went on is a little bit kind of like that, and I will definitely tell you guys about it right now. Anyway, the story of how my summer went was, around like, July or something, my owner was just coming back, from like a trip, and already he got kicked out of his house, and so what happened was then some people, came into his house and they said, they had to rent it out or something like that. And then my owner, I believe Simon, because I've had many different owners, he came back and he was like, what? People are staying at my house, And so anyway, then what happened was then the people staying over, kicked him out, And so then what happened was he had to stay somewhere else, And so luckily he was able to stay somewhere else, And so then, he believed stayed at somewhere else, I believe. I can't really know like where he stayed at, but then, one of his friends, called him on his phone and they asked him if they wanted to hang out with them on the 4th of July. So anyway, I don't really remember very much staying at the other person's house very much, but what I do remember was Simon, going into his room and he was packing a bunch of clothes and all that stuff. And then he saw me in the kitchen and then he started dragging me because at first I really didn't want to go. And he was dragging me and he was going like, come on, no, come on, Gatorade. And so then I had to be shoved into his backpack and all that stuff. And so anyway, then around like the 4th day, like we started heading to Bellevue for the 4th of July, and so we were just kind of looking around, the Bellevue Festival and all that stuff, looking for like a place to lay down. And I think we were able to find a place, to lay down. But there was a lot of crazy people at the 4th of July, in Bellevue. And there was a lot of dancing and there was a concert and all that stuff. And I mean, it was just a really good time. But it would get very, very messy very quickly. And so anyway, then what happened was like my owner Simon was like so excited to be at the 4th of July festival that like he like got out his iPhone and he started going live, on Periscope and all that stuff. And so what happened was he was like going live on Periscope. He had his goofy aviator glasses on and all that stuff. And so then what happened was then there was these not very nice people that started, commenting, on his Periscope and I think they were like trolling him and all that stuff. And so then what happened was my owner Simon was just kind of looking through the comments and all that stuff and he didn't exactly like know what to do and all that stuff. And so then what happened was like these people showed up and unfortunately they didn't look like, average Americans or something like that. And so then what happened, was then like they saw him and so then they were like, hey, that's the one right there. We gotta go get them right now. So then what happened was then as he was reading the comments, my owner Simon didn't really believe him and all that stuff. But then all of a sudden he like heard a car, that was going into the festival and it was going like vroom, vroom, and he was like looking around. And so then unfortunately then the car like smashed into a couple tents and then all the people were kind of like in shock and like going like, ah! And so then what happened was that the concert people were like going like, oh my lord. And so then they started chasing him, with like a Ford Mustang or something like that. So then my owner Simon, started running away, and it was like something out of like Forrest Gump or something like that. And then I was in the backpack, like I was like moving around, going like, don't, and so then what happened was then I believe from looking into the zipper hole, then I saw we were heading to Clyde Park Beach and all that stuff, and then like he jumped and then he started heading toward the water and all that stuff. I mean, it was just wild. And so then what happened was then as he got to Clyde Park Beach, a lot of the people, were chasing him and, from the Periscope live and so what happened was then Simon, he then saw like one of those boats, where it's like a sea-doo boat or something. And so what happened was he then got on a boat, and then he started, starting up the boat. He didn't even have a boat license and all that stuff. And then one of the sailors were going like, hey, that's my boat. And I think he might have been like an old man or something. And so then what happened was he was driving the boat going like and so then the other people that they were saying the mean things to him on Periscope, then they also stole a boat as well. And so anyway, then they started chasing him around like Lake Washington and all that stuff, and so then they were going like pretty fast, and so then and so then what happened was then then my older Simon went off a ramp, and it was just really, really crazy. And so anyway, then as the chase kept going on, then my owner Simon, he was losing control of the boat and all that stuff, and then I was able to like get out of his backpack, and then I saw him, not driving the boat correctly, and then he was heading towards another rich person's house, and I was going like, watch out! And then we were both scared and going like, ah! And so then what happened was then he crashed into the house, and then he jumped off the boat, and then like a huge explosion happened, and then what happened was then the guy got out of my house. He was like, hey, you messed up my house! And so then he was like, oh boy. And so then he started running and all that stuff. And so then he took a bus to Seattle. And then he started going through his Periscope account. And then he found out, the people that were trolling him on Periscope, unfortunately they were German and Russian spies and all that stuff. And they just, unfortunately, just did not like America. And so anyways, then what happened was to go to a safe place, he then started going to his girlfriend's house. And so anyway, then he went to like the girlfriend's house, and he took another bus, I think, to Golden Gardens, I believe. And it's so funny, like he knocked on the door, and it's so funny, like she answered the door, and so she looked at him very disgusted, and she was like, Simon, what do you want? And Simon was like, he was like, Kristen, you gotta help me. There's these spies that are after me, and they found me in Bellevue. You gotta help me. And so then Kristen was like, no, I am not helping you. Not after all the dumb crap that you did, our senior year. I am not gonna help you. And so she shut the door, in his face. And so then all of a sudden, then she had a change of heart, and she opened the door and she was like, all right, you can come in, but only for one night only. And so little did my owner Simon know, then he also met another person as well that would strangely enough help him on his journey. And so anyway, then, Simon walked into Kristen's apartment and all that stuff, and then Kristen, gave, Simon, something to drink, and I think she gave him, some, I think like 5 bottles of orange juice, and she said to him, you better drink all this stuff because at your age, you are really going to need it, And so then, Simon started drinking like all the orange juice bottles, and then there's this one fellow named Peter Computer. And the thing about Peter Computer is that he's like really smart and basically, I think he might be Kristen's like new boyfriend or something like that, And so anyway, then he then went into the door, and then him and Kristen started making out, and then Simon was just like really dumbfounded and all that stuff, and he's like, I can't believe you're with this guy now. And then Kristen was like, he has a 20-year plan, and then Simon was like, what is that? Always come up with computer stuff, And so then anyway, then Peter Computer, was going like, "Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you, Simon." And Peter Computer, like he spoke in like a German accent or something, and he was like, "Simon, I think I can really help you, with those spies. Unfortunately, Periscope and all those live things, the Russians and the Germans, they use all that stuff, and I think I could help you, try to, maybe get them to justice and all that stuff, because I know like how to, like I can really help you, try, you know, avoid them, I believe." And so then, Simon was like, "All right, okay, that's fine. I just want as much help, as possible and all that stuff, And so anyway, so the rest of the night, Simon and Peter Computer and Kristen, they were just watching TV and all that stuff. But unfortunately, then what happened was then, the spies, they ended up finding out where he was. And so anyway, then what happened was like the spies, came and all that stuff. And so then like they broke the door down and they were like going like, "Where's that American boy? Where's that American boy?" And so then everybody was all scared. They were going like, "Ah!" And so then what happened was then, then Peter Computer was going like, "Simon, run." And so then and then he was like, "Take all my microchips with you," And so what happened was then like they started chasing him, and then Kristen had to come along with them, and so then what happened was then they like ended up stealing like a car or something like that, and so then like more of them started chasing my owner Simon and all that stuff, and it was just crazy, man. It was just like a lot of stuff was just happening all around us, and so then we then stayed at a friend of Simon's, I believe, in Overlake, just to avoid them. And so then we were able to lose them. And then we ended up going to bed, around like midnight. And I was able to sleep very well. And so anyway, then what happened was like the next day, Simon's best friend, he was starting to make breakfast for him, and he was like cooking some eggs and pancakes, and then he was going like, "Morning, Simon." And then Simon got up, and he got up and he started eating some breakfast and all that stuff. And unfortunately, since this was one of Simon's friends that was not very popular in college, Kristen had a very disgusted look on her face. And so anyway, then after breakfast, they got out of, his best friend's apartment. And then Simon was like, "Well, at least we got some breakfast." And then all of a sudden, Kristen punched him in the face and kicked him in the balls. And then he was like, "Oh!" And then he fell down by the bus stop, and then she was going like, and then she like walked away from him, and then she started heading to the bus, and then she like flipped him off and all this stuff, and then Simon was like, "Help me, oh." So then what happened next was, as Simon was laying down, then his cell phone started to ring, and then he answered his phone, and he was like, "This is Simon." And then all of a sudden, it was his grandma! And then his grandma was going like, "Simon, this is your grandma! I was wondering when you were going to come over sometime." And then Simon was like, "I will be there less than an hour." And so then his grandma said, "It's like, oh, that is wonderful. That's really wonderful that you can come over, and maybe stay for a couple days. I will make you some nice double chocolate chocolate chip cookies and some milk with it." And so Simon would be like, "Grandma, that would be wonderful. I will be there very, very, very soon." So anyway, then what happened was Steve, he had to go on the bus, to Lake City and all that stuff. And so anyways, what happened was he then, caught up to his grandma. And so as he was catching up, to his grandma and met up with her and all that stuff, he then like stayed, at like her house and all that stuff, and things were like really fine and all that jazz and everything like that, and things were nice. But then what happened, as Simon went to bed, he then started having like a lot of crazy dreams. He just started having like a lot of crazy crazy dreams, and I don't know if I'll go into like the detail of all of them or not, but they were just like really crazy. And then what happened was like he was like having a dream like about like one of the girls that he had a crush on, but unfortunately the dream itself turned out to be very bogus, and so then he woke up in shock. He was like, "Ah!" So then anyway, as Simon was inside his grandma's house throughout the remainder of the day, his grandma was like, "Alright, I'm getting hungry. Let's say we go to a Chinese food restaurant." And so anyway, Simon and his grandma, they went on this really interesting journey where they went from Lake City in Seattle, and then they drove all the way to Linwood. And so they went to this Chinese food buffet called V-Star Buffet. But unfortunately what happened was they went into the buffet and they got a lot of food as always and all that stuff. But then what happened was like the restaurant owner was noticing them, Simon eating a lot of Chinese food, and he challenged him to a Chinese food eating contest. And so then he was starting to eat a lot of Chinese food. And then it was Simon versus the Chinese food restaurant owner. And so they were eating a bunch of sushi. And I think in total they ate like 60 plates of sushi, and then more broccoli beef and orange chicken and kung pao chicken as well. I mean, it was just a crazy time. It was nuts. And so anyway, then as they got to their 40th plate of sushi, then the Russian and German spies, came into the V-Star buffet. And so then what happened was then, as they got to the buffet, they scared, Simon. And then Simon, started screaming like a little girl. And he was going like, "Ah!" And so he then ran out of the V-Star buffet without paying and all that stuff. And then and so then what happened was he then got on a motorcycle, and so he went on a motorcycle and he started heading to the beach that was in Edmonds and all that stuff. And so then what happened was that he's like, "I'm sorry that I couldn't, spend time with your grandma. I need to get out of here, And so then he was starting the motorcycle, and the motorcycle flew by the the pass and all that stuff, and then it just like zoomed into the ferry and all that stuff, and then what happened was Simon fell off the ferry. And so anyway, then what happened was as Simon, went into like the Puget Sound, he was like all wet and cold and all that stuff, and then I was pretty cold as well, and so then what happened was, Simon started sinking in the water, and I was sinking as well, but then luckily we got saved. But unfortunately, we got saved by the Russian and German spies, that unfortunately trolled Simon on Periscope. And so anyway, then they started putting him on an airplane, and then they sent him to their spy headquarters, that was in like Russia or something like that. And we just didn't know how we were going to get out and all that stuff. Like we had to, had no idea how we were going to get out and all that stuff. I mean, it was just not a very nice place, But then luckily, Peter Computer was able to find us, and so then we were able to escape and all that stuff. But unfortunately, we then got on to a plane and all that stuff, and that's where we accidentally ran into a lot of problems. A lot of very big problems. But unfortunately, we then got to the Russian airport or something, and unfortunately, Simon didn't really have his passport with him, and so when he went through customs and immigration and all that stuff, the Russian police noticed this, and they were like, "Hey, you don't have your passport," and so then unfortunately they like arrested him and they pigpiled on him, and so what happened was then he was interrogated by like the Russian police and all that stuff, and so what happened was that Simon had to, unfortunately got deported, and he got deported back to the States and all that stuff. And so anyways, he then got deported back and all that stuff. And so what happened was he was on an airplane, and the Russians, they said, "You should have never, invaded our country, goodbye." And so they kicked him off the plane, and he was falling in the sky, and he was going like, "Ah!" And so anyway, then as Simon, was falling down from the sky, he was then falling down, but luckily though, like they put a parachute inside of his backpack, and so then, he pulled the parachute cord, and so then he started, falling down, very gently and all that stuff, and then I was able to get out of the backpack to see the beautiful view of the Pacific Northwest and all that stuff. and we even managed, to see like the Seattle skyline as well. And we were able to like see all that and all that stuff. But unfortunately, then like one of the birds, then there was a bunch of seagulls and crows, that were flying around, and so unfortunately they like poked a hole inside of his parachute, and then and then what happened when he started falling down like really fast, and he was like, oh no, and so then he kept on yelling like a sissy girl, and and he was going like ah, and then he fell down like on a baseball field and all that stuff. And so then, as he was like in the baseball field, then a bunch of more birds, started attacking him as well. And, and then he started running away like from the birds and all that stuff. And then a bunch of ducks started chasing him as well. And so he was like running around, and I think what happened was like as he was in the sky, I think what happened was like the Russians and the German spies, put some, animal spray on him, so that way he would attract a lot of animals and all that stuff. And so what happened was like a bunch of, like animals started chasing him, around Green Lake, and a bunch of birds started flying, and then he was going like, no! Ah! And then finally he took the bus home, and he got on this last bus back to Maple Valley, and a lot of people on the bus, they started looking at him going like, oh my God, that guy got messed up, and so what happened, he then went on, the last bus, to Maple Valley, and he knocked on the door, and what happened was, they knocked on the door, and what happened was, like, the renters opened the door and be like, man, what happened to you? And they, like, said that, and then Simon was just, like, completely dumbfounded. And so what happened was, later that night, like, he had to take a shower and all that stuff, and it was just not good. It was just not good at all. And also, yeah, it was just not a very good trip. It was, and I can't believe like it all started with like a Periscope live that went really, really wrong. It just did not. It was just not good at all. But unfortunately, the whole story didn't really stop there. As Simon, was all cleaned up, and he had all the dog and duck and all the bad animal stuff on your body as humanly possible, and all that stuff, Then, Simon, as he was back, he heard a knock on the door, and unfortunately, it was Kristen again, and she was not very, she was very upset at Simon because, like, Simon ruined, her weekend and all that stuff, and what's even more worse is that Peter Computer and unfortunately ended up getting blown up and all that stuff, and so and I don't mean blown up like like he was an actual computer and all that stuff. I just kind of mean his own computer got destroyed and all that stuff. And so Kristen she couldn't so she unfortunately lost communication, with him and all that stuff. And so then, Simon answered the door, and so, and then, she, Simon answered the door and all that stuff. And so Simon was like, what happened to you? And what happened was like Kristen had a bunch of, explosive marks on her face, and her hair was all messed up. And what happened was she ended up punching Simon in the face and knocking him out, and unfortunately, poor Simon, he just did not have a very good trip, at all, and yeah, the moral of the story is that, it is okay to do a Periscope live. But you just have to be very careful with the hashtags that you do, because if you're not careful, a lot of bad people on Periscope and social media could find you, and you could get yourself in a really bad load of trouble. You can get into a lot of crazy trouble and get chased by a lot of bad people, And yeah, you just got to be careful out there, you young men and you young brothers out there. There you have it, everybody. I mean, that is the story of my owner Simon, on his summer, and it all started on the 4th of July, and he was on live on Periscope and all that stuff, and then he got in trouble getting chased by them, and he was staying at people's houses, and then he was staying at his grandma's house, and then another point, he was staying at someone else's house. Then he was staying at his best friend's house, I mean, he was just everywhere in Western Washington, man. And, the moral of the story goes, you just got to be careful on social media. You just have to be careful, And I know the summer is a very exciting time, to go to beaches and lakes and oceans and go on boats, and then to see some beautiful and stunning girls and all that stuff. But you just got to be careful and all stuff. And all that stuff, because I don't want all of you guys or the people watching this video to be like my owner Simon, because if you are, you'll definitely run into like a lot of trouble and all that stuff, because I know my owner Simon, he sure did ran into a lot of trouble this summer. And unfortunately too, every time he made a comment on Instagram, with his girlfriend, or I should say his ex-girlfriend would delete his Instagram comments, and then another girl would delete his Instagram comments. Anyway, the point of this is just be very careful out there, and just be very, very careful out there, because we live in a very strange, time in this day and age. Well, anyway, goodbye, everybody, and I hope all of you guys have the good rest of your summer. And I also hope that you guys have a good fall as well.
and that you